With a hand leisurely placed under his chin, Zhang Yi ignored them and began to carefully check the surrounding environment. He was good at long-range attacks, not close combat. If he is attacked by close combat masters such as Dagonghui Yanjin or Tsukamoto Nobunaga, it may be dangerous for him. An estimated value of about 0.01% of the danger probability, so this situation, if encountered, must be prevented at all cost. Zhang Yi had to figure out the environment first, then choose a safe position to wait for the opportunity to snipe. Using the Thunderbolt and the Origin Bullet, his range can completely cover the entire 5-kilometer range of Jiangning Square. Zhang Yi's eyes wandered around for a long time before they finally landed on a burnt black commercial building not far away. He immediately determined that building as the perfect location of his ambush. So without a second thought, he opened the dimensional door without waiting for Chen Xiaoxiao and Peng Li to agree. Before entering, he turned his head slightly in their direction and casually reminded the two. Don't forget, he coldly stated. The intelligence-gathering ability of the enemy is particularly strong. I guess they already know our location by now and have dispatched troops to deal with us. However, since we are not familiar with this place and the enemy have the advantage of the first move, I plan to use static to break the dynamic. I will set up an ambush on the rooftop, and your task is to stay nearby and protect my safety. Zhang Yi immediately turned to leave the scene, leaving no room for any objection. Liang Yu, you are responsible for protecting me closely. Hearing this, Liang Yu nodded and rushed to Zhang Yi's side. The two, together with Flower, entered the dimensional door and appeared on the top of the building the next moment. Chen Xiaoxiao and Peng Li were left speechless, staring at the closing portal, then at each other with widened eyes. What the? Did he just abandon us? Peng Li looked incredulous. What kind of a fucking captain is this? So irresponsible. She roared in anger. Chen Xiaoxiao raised her eyebrows, looked around cautiously, and stated solemnly. He knew very well that we were only in a temporary partnership, so he didn't intend to care about our opinions from the beginning. Now that we are in a dangerous battlefield, his behavior is indeed a bit childish. Peng Li sighed and asked what they should do. Chen Xiaoxiao calmly stated that for the time being, they should do what Zhang Yi had instructed. After all, they could be in greater danger if they were to leave the group rashly. The two had no choice but to stick around the building and wait for Eclipse's people to come to them. Meanwhile, their conversation was actually heard clearly at the combat command center. Zhu Zheng stared at Zhang Yi on top of the building and couldn't help but sigh. A bit stunned. This Zhang Yi is too cowardly, but I will admit that he is very smart, and his approach is indeed a good way to test the opponent's ability. Everyone knew that Eclipse Moon had a strong ability to obtain intelligence, but no one knew what the exact ability was. Zhang Yi chose to hide outside Jiangning Square and not take the initiative to attack. If the other party could still clearly find their location, it could basically be concluded that their ability was a terrible ability similar to the nature of prophecy. Anyway, Zhu Zheng looked at the other two outer city teams and calmly asked, so what are the other two teams doing? The people on Wu Shifeng and Zhuo Feiyu's side also kept an extremely vigilant attitude as they moved forward. They knew that this operation was full of dangers, so they didn't dare to be careless. As Wu Shifeng and the other three arrived at the designated location, there was not much verbal arrangement between the few people. Compared with Zhang Yi's side, the people in the other two teams had already formulated a battle plan. After all, not everyone was like Zhang Yi, who was fully confident in his own strength but still act cowardly. They strategized a good team battle plan to ensure that there was no mistakes. After entering Jiangning Square area, the first thing to do was reconnaissance. Mo Zhongning from Wu Shifeng's team confidently stepped forward. His eyes were fixed on the large ruins in front of him, and then he slowly squatted down. He was wrapped in a heavy coat, and although his right hand was placed on the heavy snow, he did not feel any cold. His team members around him clearly saw that his sleeves were shaking restlessly, followed by a burst of golden light which immediately condensed around his hand, then flowed to the depths of the earth. Suddenly, gray rodents drilled out of the snow. Mo Zhongning was a release-type ability user, with codename Soul Beast. He can transform his supernatural powers into different animals, and these animals can share his 5 senses with him like his clones. Zhu Zheng watched the entire scene with a somewhat knowing look. Mo Zhongning's ability was really convenient to use supernatural beasts for reconnaissance. However, since he is the leader of a faction, his ability must be more than just reconnaissance. Mo Zhongning must also have strong combat power. Back on the battlefield, numerous small soul beasts actually crawled out of the snow like gray water streams, and in just a dozen seconds, hundreds of them had appeared. They stood on the snow and turned their heads to look at Mo Zhongning with human-like light flashing in their eyes. Go find them, Mo Zhongning murmured in a low voice. The soul beast squeaked and then rushed into the burned square. Soon, they disappeared in the ruins. On the other hand, Zhuofeiyu's team did not have similar reconnaissance methods, but they had an old hand who was proficient in reconnaissance. Yu Zhengyang had been a scout for 7 years, so he was responsible for leading the way and carefully searching for any traces of the Eclipse group. Meanwhile, inside the unspecified warehouse in Jiangning Square, the 13 members of the Eclipse group had gathered. Although they were surrounded by smoke and dark dust, they seemed unbothered at all. They had already taken shelter before the bombing. 12 of them sat in a circle, and in the middle was the middle-aged pessimist Jinguji Saikairo. He took his hands out of his suit pockets and habitually pushed his dark-rimmed glasses. His slender and skinny index finger slowly raised, and a little golden light appeared on the fingertips, then eventually radiated around him. His eyes suddenly became sharp, and his right hand quickly moved in the air while chanting a spell. Jinguji Saikairo murmured something unintelligently, something along the line of, "When the soldiers fight, all the formations are in front of the line." Suddenly, the golden light condensed in the air and quickly turned into a huge golden pentagram. In Jinguji Saikairo's eyes, the golden light flickered. As he pointed his right hand to the sky, the golden pentagram shattered and turned into tiny spells that went straight up into the sky. A moment later, with the location of the warehouse as the center, a white majestic mist began to spread around, and in just a few minutes, the entire Jiangning Square was shrouded. The 3 teams discovered the abnormality at first sight and reported to the Combat Command Center. Status report: an unknown fog had suddenly emerged, and the coverage area is very large. It seems to be the people of Eclipse Moon about to take action. Zhu Zhang immediately replied from the command center, ordering everyone to be careful. They need to prevent the mutants of Eclipse Moon from taking advantage of the fog to attack. Needless to say, the mutants in the outer cities will be more careful themselves. This ability was not mentioned in the intelligence at all. Zhuofeiyu expressed his thoughts with a serious expression. Sure enough, they still kept a lot in the first battle. Veteran Yu Zhengyang added calmly, "This is just a trick to cover the sight. It is not offensive." In Wu Shifang's team, Mo Zhongning sneered in a mocking manner. "The thick fog can block everyone's sight, but it can't block my soul beasts. It's better to say that this battlefield is more conducive to my performance." In any case, the 2 teams were slowly moving towards Jiangning Square. On the contrary, Zhang Yi, through his tactical scope, took aim on the roof of the building at the edge of Jiangning Square, with no intention of moving forward. He was simply waiting for the enemy to come to him, and it wasn't a ridiculous exaggeration to be certain that the enemy would come to him. At this time in the Combat Command Center, the 3 reconnaissance teams had the authority to act independently. In the state of unclear situation ahead, Zhu Zhang would not verbally order them to do anything. It was the battlefield after all, and the ability to adapt to circumstances was the most important. Zhu Zhang chose to trust the strategy of the mutants in the outer cities. With a stern look, he frowned slightly as he stared at the thick fog in front of him. In addition to fighter planes, the armed forces they sent out also had low-altitude unmanned reconnaissance aircraft. But at this time, the cameras of these reconnaissance aircraft were all covered. Their advantage in local operations was gone. Next, they could only rely on the portable cameras of the outer city mutant teams to grasp everything that happened on the scene. As the scene shifted back to the Eclipse group, Jinguji Saikairo, after using his ability, casually placed his hands back into his pockets. Then, a gray bird which suddenly landed on his shoulder, opened its mouth in a grotesque manner, and slowly spit out 12 identical gray crows, which immediately landed on the shoulders of the others. Jinguji Saikairo turned his gaze towards Mayumi Takeuchi. The impatience on his face never disappeared. "This battlefield will become an unknown area. So Mayumi, it's up to you." Feng Wangenjin smiled and thanked Jinguji Saikairo for his hard work. "Jinguji Saikairo," he said, "your methods are still as reliable as always." Jinguji Saikairo sighed helplessly, said nothing, and silently took a seat amidst the others as the Shrine Maiden took over. Mayumi Takeuchi glanced at Feng Wangenjin, and after getting his approval, she slowly walked to the center of the circle. She gracefully knelt down and slowly took out a familiar scroll from her head, then placed it neatly on the floor. This time, Mayumi Takeuchi only took out her thin, long brush, because the previous reserve of the bright red ink had been used up. She stretched out her left hand, revealing her white arm, and with a soft puff, the slender brush in her right hand stabbed her left arm without hesitation. Blood flowed, but not a single drop of blood was wasted. The brush sucked in big gulps of her blood and immediately condensed on the tip. Mayumi Takeuchi looked extremely calm and began to write on the long scroll. A while later, the scroll was already covered with dense blood words. Mayumi Takeuchi's face was a little pale, and it was obvious that the use of this power was also very exhausting for her. But she still said calmly, "The enemy had arrived in the west and north with 4 people each. In addition, there are enemies lurking in the dark who have not yet appeared." Fengguang Jin and Jinguji Saikairo briefly stared at each other before looking at the divine text on the scroll. Jinguji Saikairo frowned slightly and expressed his thoughts. If there are only 2 teams coming, then it seems that the number of people this time is much less than last time. Perhaps they are all elite troops. What if they are just cannon fodder to lure us out and test our abilities? Fengguang Jin added after a deep thought. Jinguji Saikairo slowly pushed his glasses and stated that it doesn't matter. As long as Mayumi is here, we will not be at a disadvantage tactically. He looked at Mayumi Takeuchi and under everyone's expectant gaze, asked her to tell them what to do. As Mayumi Takeuchi's divination ended, she held up the scroll and stared back at Jinguji Saikairo with a slight nod. Subsequently, the members of the Eclipse Moon also received their combat orders. At this point, everyone was very optimistic about this battle, because as long as they acted according to Mayumi Takeuchi's predictions, they had never failed. In the center of the battle formation, Shishimono Satoru sat cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed. His ability Enlightenment Demon was activated. The 13 members of the Eclipse organization were suddenly connected by a red thread in his field of vision, and the point of convergence was on him. With his existence, no matter how far apart the 13 members were, they could get in touch in time. In other words, the information shielding function of the Jiangnan district has no effect on them. And with the existence of Grey Crow, the Misty Fog will have no restrictions on them either. However, Jinguji Saikairo suddenly seemed to have noticed something too suspicious to ignore. Why are there only soldiers coming from 2 directions? With the 2 teams arriving from just the north and west, there is a vacant position from the southeast. Is that position deliberately left for us to escape? Or is there something else? This made Fengguang Jin smiled even more. These guys must have set a trap waiting for us to jump in. They obviously don't understand who the prey was and who was the hunter. Anyway, there is no need to follow their pace. We must seize the initiative on the battlefield. Just believe in Mayumi's divination. Jinguji frowned and thought for a moment, then agreed silently. You are the captain. This problem is left to you to solve. Don't be careless, because one careless thing will kill someone. Hearing this, Fengguang just motioned for everyone to leave quickly. Let's have a good fight. It's time to let the leaders of the Jiangnan district know that Eclipse Moon is an existence they can't afford to offend. So, one after another, the mutants left the warehouse. Meanwhile, on the western front, Wu Shifang and the others did not rush forward, but silently waited for Mo Zhongning's reconnaissance results. The soul beasts have been moving forward from the ruins, heading towards the area within the unknown range in front. They share the 5 senses with Mo Zhongning, and as long as they detect the traces of the enemy, Mo Zhongning will sense it too. Wu Shifang and the other 2 were guarding beside Mo Zhongning. Suddenly, a dazzling golden light appeared in the vision of a soul beast inside the fog. The next moment, it completely disappeared in the ruins. Mo Zhongning opened his eyes suddenly. One of my soul beasts was killed. The expressions of Wu Shifang and the other 2 suddenly became solemn. Did you find the location of a member of Eclipse Moon? I'm not sure, Mo Zhongning answered. Let me take a closer look. A soul beast was killed, but Mo Zhongning was not in a hurry. He could summon 138 soul beasts at a time. Now that the location of the dead soul beast has been determined, other soul beasts can gather in that direction. Then judge the identity of the person coming. Therefore, Mo Zhongning immediately mobilized the soul beasts around that area and began to explore for intelligence. The other soul beasts were ordered to retreat by Mo Zhongning. The area west of Jiangning Square was not large, so a few soul beasts can quickly explore that area of the ruins. But what was waiting for them was a huge black hand cannon. And the attack method that immediately followed was supernatural shells. The gunner of the Eclipse Moon organization, Kurosawa Akira, wasted no time announcing his presence. The moment the soul beasts appeared, they were killed by Kurosawa Akira one shot after another. Mo Zhongning immediately recognized his identity and knew that he had little time left, so he quickly used the remaining instant perspective of other soul beasts to observe anyone around Kurosawa Akira. In addition to Kurosawa Akira, there were 2 other figures walking slowly towards his side. One was a spirited young man with a sofa-like hairstyle, Sakuraba Yoshiguang. As for the third person, when Mo Zhongning saw his body shape clearly, he stood up in fear, gasping for breath. His pupils also shrank suddenly too. It's him. Damn it. How could we be so unlucky? The moment he finished speaking, All the soul beasts he sent out were wiped out. Wu Shifang and the other two were shocked when they saw this. Mo Zhongning, what did you see? What on earth is it that scares you so much? Mo Zhongning's eyes flashed with resentment, and he replied with a panicked look. We encountered that monster here. Dagonghui Yanjin. As soon as these words came out, the faces of Wu Shifang, Li Weihai and Jia Heading also became solemn. They have all seen the strength of Dagonghui Yanjin. In the first battle, he easily wiped out 2 mutant teams with his own strength. Among the known enemies, he was definitely the most dangerous one. He was also the guy that everyone was most reluctant to meet. But seeing Mo Zhongning's resentful look, Wu Shifang snorted coldly and silently. Even if you meet a powerful enemy, you don't have to be so scared, right? We all have one head on 2 shoulders. I don't believe that the 4 of us can't be his match. As an orc-type mutant of the reinforcement system, Wu Shifang was also a local hero, and his strength was above Li Guoqiang and Meng Shuqing, who were killed by Dagonghui Yanjin. So, with the support from capable teammates, Wu Shifang believes that his team can fight Dagonghui Yanjin. Mo Zhongning covered his forehead and added some details he'd failed to mention. The bastard didn't come alone, he hopelessly stated. He brought 2 people with him as helpers. Even if it's 4 against 3, it's even a question on whether we can hold them off, let alone defeat them. We might die. With the exception of Zhang Yi, the other 2 captains of the 3 teams all had extraordinary courage, and the candidates for regional assessment were not randomly selected. Wu Shifang's character is bold and careful, so he was not afraid of danger. Wu Shifang immediately informed the command center. The Western team has encountered the enemy, and 3 people have been found so far, namely, Dagonghui Yanjin, Sakuraba Yuzhuguang, and Kurosawa Akira. At the other end of the line, Zhu Zhang replied to Wu Shifang's report after a brief pause. Very good. Deal with them according to the original plan. Hold them back and try to force them to use their superpowers. Create an opportunity for the celestial team to break through. Wu Shifang understood their task and ended the call. Since we are here, let's set aside our fear of death and fight them as hard as we can. Wu Shifang stated passionately. It's 4 against 3, so we have the advantage. Jiangning was Wu Shifang's home, and he believes that once this operation fails, his relatives and friends will be wiped out by the Eclipse Moon, so he must fight to the death. Even if he has to sacrifice his life for it, it would be worth it. Mo Zhongning and the other 2 may not have such a great spirit of dedication as him. But now that things have come to this, they can't retreat. Not only will they lose their reputation if they flee from the battlefield, but they will also be liquidated by the Jiangnan region. It's better to fight for a future. Mo Zhongning gritted his teeth and shouted in a low voice, Okay, let's have a fight with them. I want to see how capable those bastards from Japan are. The 4 people formed a diamond formation according to their original plan, with the enhanced mutant Wu Shifang blocking in front, Mo Zhongning and Li Weihai on the left and right, and Jia Heading behind the crowd. Soon, a tall shadow slowly emerged from the fog. Dagonghui Yanjin's figure appeared in front of everyone first. Then, Sakuraba Yuzhuguang and Kurosawa Akira, with a playful smile on their faces, soon followed. With the help of the Grey Crow, they could clearly find the enemy even in the thick fog, so this encounter was of little effort. When they saw the 4 people, the chief engineer Dagonghui Yanjin suddenly frowned, looking disappointed. Aren't they the elite sent by the Jiangnan district? But why do they look so weak? Sakuraba Yuzhuguang crossed his arms and replied with a smile. Perhaps they are just cannon fodder sent to test us. We can just deal with them casually. I think their main force is behind, hiding in the dark. In that case, let's not waste time with them. Dagonghui Yanjin stated after the 3 wordlessly agreed on a decision. On the other hand, seeing that the Eclipse Moon members did not take them seriously, Wu Shifang and the rest were angry. Although they could not speak the same language, they could clearly see the expressions on their faces. Wu Shifang and his team were prepared to fight against the 3 simultaneously. But unexpectedly, Sakuraba Yuzhuguang and Kurosawa Akira took a few steps back in tacit understanding, indicating that Dagonghui Yanjin was their opponent. And in order to show that they would not interfere in this battle, they actually retreated to a few dozen meters away. Meanwhile, the northern team also encountered 2 members of the Eclipse group shortly after the western team. Kamaya Negemichi, a short-haired strong man with a fierce square face and rustic black-framed glasses, and Akutsu Shinichiro, a gangster with a red hedgehog hair and a piercing on the right ear. According to the information obtained before, Zhuofeiyu and his team also immediately knew the identity of the other party. Zhuofeiyu was slightly relieved, because the combat power shown by these 2 people in the first battle was not too terrifying. At least compared with the great factory Dagonghui Yanjin that Wu Shifang and his team encountered, these 2 did not show particularly strong combat power. At the Combat Command Center, Zhu Zhang saw the news reported by the two teams and silently observed this new development. 5 of the 13 members of the Eclipse group have appeared so far. In other words, there are still 8 people who have not appeared. Even if we remove the non-combat personnel, there should be at least 6 combat-type mutants. It seems the situation depends on what's going on with Zhang Yi's team. Anyway, speaking of Zhang Yi's team, they had been waiting for a while in the southeast direction, but no member of the Eclipse group had appeared. And as for the 2 partners, Chun Xiaoxiao and Peng Li, they were also cautiously waiting under the building at this time. The appearance of enemies on Wu Shifeng and Zhuo Feiyu's side made them more cautious. They all felt that the enemy would appear soon. But as time passed, the sound of fighting and shouting over there appeared in their communication devices, and even the fog around there did not change at all. Huh? What's going on? Zhang Yi couldn't help but frowned. According to common sense, since Eclipse Moon has a strong reconnaissance ability, they must have discovered his arrival long ago. But why had he waited for so long, and the enemy hadn't made a single move? Could it be that Zhang Yi's eyes widened, and a possibility came to his mind? The ability they possessed. Could it be that they saw through Zhang Yi's strength? And out of fear and vigilance, they didn't dare to send anyone over? What exactly is the ability they possess? Zhang Yi muttered to himself. He was alert, suddenly believing that the opponent was unpredictable and too scary. This is the case in the world of mutants where all kinds of strange and mysterious abilities may appear. The scene shifted to the Eclipse organization side. With Jinguji Saikairo's reminder, Feng Guangyuanjin had also noticed the empty spots when he checked on the map. He murmured to himself, a bit confused. Mayumi's divination can't be wrong. That is to say, there are no enemies between the east and south. What kind of trick is the enemy planning? Feng Guangyuanjin's expression was serious. He didn't like the feeling that things were out of his control. But at the moment, he had no idea about what kind of trap the Jiangnan region had set in the southeast. At this time, Tsukamoto Nobunaga, who was by his side, spoke up in his usual somewhat bored tone. No need to be so troubled about this matter. I'll just go over and take a look. He turned around and looked at Mayumi Takeuchi. After all, Mayumi also said that I will be in the southeast today. Feng Guangyuanjin agreed with a slight nod. Indeed, since Mayumi said so, there must be no problem. Nobunaga, that direction is up to you. See what tricks the other party has. He waved his hand and said to the couple Takizawa Takashi and Nanako Agatsuma beside him, Ryuzawa and my wife Nanako, just follow Nobunaga. The two had no objections and followed Tsukamoto Nobunaga. The gray crow on their shoulders would guide them in the direction of travel. Back to the battlefield on Wu Shifeng's side, the fight was about to break out. At this moment, Wu Shifeng's body underwent a strange change. His body began to wriggle, almost vibrating at an insane speed. And soon, Wu Shifeng's body began to appear at 2 places simultaneously. This was Wu Shifeng's ability, Duplicate Shadow. He can create an appearance and body shape exactly the same as himself. A doppelganger with his skills and knowledge. Wu Shifeng reached out and opened a huge weapon box he brought with him. It was a black wooden box. Upon closer look, one might even think it was a small coffin. Wu Shifeng took out a huge silver oxhorn bow from it and handed it to the clone. Then, he took out 2 huge copper hammers from the other side. The Legu Wangjinshue, the weapon of Ma Yuan, the general of the Han Dynasty, the legendary leader of the 4 Fierce 8 Hammers, and the weapon of Li Yuanba, the world's #1 warrior. The size of the copper hammer is twice that of an adult's head. Each one is made of solid alloy and weighs more than 100 pounds. It is equivalent to holding 2 adults in your hands as a weapon. This kind of weapon originally only existed in legends. But in this era of mutation, there are really people who can use it freely. And the silver-bronze oxhorn giant bow in the clone's hand also looks full of oppression. Dagonghui Yanjin stared at them, his gaze particularly on Wu Shifeng. What's the point of this? Does it make you look more imposing? As an orc-type mutant with a beastman-type ability, Dagonghui Yanjin didn't even transform. Whether it was words or actions, they revealed extreme contempt. He casually waved his huge dragonfly blade lazily and motioned at them. What are you waiting for? Are you afraid of 4 against 1? Cursing, Wu Shifeng gritted his teeth and rushed towards Dagonghui Yanjin like a whirlwind. At the same time, his clone also drew his bow and arrow. With a whoosh, the sound of breaking through the air was like a long cry of an eagle. The speed of the arrow was exactly the same as that of Wu Shifeng's body, and it attacked Dagonghui Yanjin from 2 directions.